juniors and seniors here at Franklin and Marshall College. I'm Katie Kerwood, and I'm the Director of Parent and Athletic Advancement. I will be your moderator today for our discussion, and I'll start with a few housekeeping details. We are expecting a really large crowd today, which we're excited for. All attendees are muted with their cameras off. We are recording our session today, and we welcome you to use our go.fnm.edu/townhall form to submit questions. I'll say it again. It's go.fnm.edu/townhall. I'm sure I'll be monitoring all of our questions, and whenever possible, we'll be able to combine questions to make sure that we can address as many concerns as possible. I know that we won't be able to get to all of our questions, but I want to make sure that everyone is checking out our reopening plan that is still in progress by visiting the FNM Reopening Plan website regularly. You can access that from the FNM website at www.f as in Franklin and A-N-D-M as in Marshall.edu. The information on that site will be continued to update it, including frequently asked questions. If you can't find the answers you need, we do have a form on there where you can seek further information. For today's session, I am excited to announce that we have President Barbara Altman, Provost and Dean of the Faculty, Cameron Wesson, Vice President and Dean of Student Affairs, Margaret Hazlett, who will be saying a few words and answering our questions. We're also pleased that Donna Flum, who is our co-chair of our reopening operations team, is joining in as well to help answer your questions. President Altman, I'm excited to turn our session over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. This is really fabulous. I can't tell you how happy I am to see 350 people on this call. That's a great start, and we may well add some more before we're done. Welcome, welcome to our parents of sophomores, juniors, and seniors. It's delightful to know you're there, even though I can't see every one of you. And the large turnout for this call is proof of what we suspected, that every one of you must have dozens of questions. We know that you will have so many more than we can possibly answer today, and we ask for your patience at this time. We are working methodically and deliberately, as well as around the clock, to put together the plan to have your students come back with us this fall. You might be interested to know that in the survey that we recently sent to returning students, we got a huge percentage, a huge majority of students who said that they preferred to come back for in-person instruction and residential education. And that, of course, is our first preference too. The campus is quiet. We miss having your students here. We learn and work really well as a community, and it's a very important moment to be doing that. So we're delighted that we are moving towards reopening. But I do want to say a couple of preliminary words, and that is to recognize this is a time of enormous uncertainty in so many ways for all of us right now. There is, of course, the primary concern for the health of your loved ones, for your own health, for the health of your community. And with the numbers of COVID-19 infections skyrocketing in various parts of the country, it's still a moment when it's clear that we haven't figured out how to stem this tide. So the real challenge for all of us, for schools like us and for Franklin and Marshall, is to figure out how we can do residential education with the appropriate protocols and safety measures in place, knowing that we cannot guarantee that there will be no COVID-19 among us, but knowing nonetheless that we can create community and we can create meaningful interaction and we can have in-person instruction and we can have co-curricular activities and recreational activities as well, with all of the mentoring and the advising and the career preparation and the tutoring and the healthcare in place, both virtually and in person. All of that is manageable if everyone on campus agrees to abide by the necessary protocols. That's why we've given you and your children a choice about whether they want to come back. Everyone who comes back, our professional staff and our faculty and the administration and students alike, will be having to agree to a compact, a social compact by which we all agree to observe the necessary protocols and safety measures so that we can protect each individual, the campus community, but also the community of Lancaster. We're so fortunate to be situated in this wonderful city of Lancaster, and we will invite our students to interact with the city of Lancaster just as they always have done, although respecting all the guidelines that are in place here in Pennsylvania, and also that have been put in place here in the city. So the restaurants are open, but the density is reduced and most of the seating is outdoors. Many merchants, many stores are open, but one has to wear a mask. The governor of Pennsylvania has recently announced that everyone is expected to wear a mask whenever they leave the house. And I never leave the house without more than one. So those are the realities of life these days. But given those realities, we can put together a tremendously exciting year. And I'll say a little bit more about that larger vision at the end of our time together today. I wanted to let you know the principles that we've decided on as the baseline bedrock foundation. There are four principles on which we are basing all of our preparations for this year. The first one is, in fact, what I've already talked about, the health and safety of all members of the community. And to that end, for example, we will test all students who come back to campus, not only when they arrive, but again a week later to catch any that were missed by errors in the testing or anyone who was asymptomatic and did not register on the test the first time, but does in fact register on the second. We will also do surveillance testing, random testing throughout the term to make sure that we know what the prevalence is of COVID-19 among us. We are putting aside quarantine and isolation space so that we can care for students who need to be away from the community while they're waiting for test results or who are showing symptoms but are not ill enough to go into the hospital. So we're taking care of that as well. And we will be doing daily screenings. Everyone who works on campus and all students will be asked to screen every day to make sure that they're not displaying any symptoms. And if they are, we will ask them to withdraw from any activity. So that was pillar number one for our opening plan. The second is to retain and figure out how to adapt the power of the academic experience for which we are known. High-powered academics are what F&M is based on. Your students know that by now. They've all done at least a year, some of them 3 with us already. And so our faculty have done a lot of work to begin to learn, in fact, to learn much more thoroughly how to optimize whatever the online components are of the courses they're teaching, to really focus on those characteristics of the way we educate, which is a lot of mentoring, a lot of peer education, a lot of analytical work, a lot of project work, a lot of collaboration. And we are learning now in this third iteration of teaching under the pandemic, how best to utilize what's available to us online. But beyond that, a great proportion, a great majority of our faculty are also interested in teaching in person. And that we will do by rearranging spaces in the classroom, by having personal protective equipment available, and by all learning how to work differently in the spaces your students already know so well. So the power of the academic experience was the second pillar of our planning. The third is the quality of student life. And I want to assure you that it is well worth coming back. Almost all of the facets of on-campus life will be available, even again, if they look a little bit different than they have in the past. Tutoring, writing support, the Quantum Science Center will be available for help. We will have a social life. There will be clubs and recreational opportunities. Our wellness center will be available both for televisits and for in-person visits once people have been screened. And our counseling is also available both in person and through televisits. So our Osbegod Center, our professional preparation center, will also be doing a very full program. You can expect that when your students come back, they will have the usual full panoply of support, of help, of enrichment, and of fun that they do in a more regular year. The fourth and last pillar on which we are doing all our planning is the pillar of equity and inclusion. With every decision we make, we take the time to stop and think, is this particular measure serving all of our populations well? Does it work for our employees? Does it work for our faculty? Does it work for all of our students from all of our subgroups of students? And so that is another piece of the puzzle that we look at with every decision and every strategic planning move that we make. We have a representative on our reopening operations team whose job is in fact to make sure that we are working equity and inclusion into all of our decision making. So, with that said, I want to just state again that there are still many unknowns. We'll be able to answer a lot of questions today, and we will leave ample time for Q&A. But I also want to remind you that you can go to our new website. We're doing a redesign of that already now so that we can make it even more user-friendly and make it easier for you to find information on it based on some feedback we've already had. Now, without further ado, so that you can hear from our provost, Cam Wesson, I'd like to ask Dr. Wesson to take the baton and give you a download on what the overview of our hybrid model approach for the year looks like. Provost Wesson, are you ready to go?
I am, President Altman. Thank you very much. And thank you to the almost 400 of you who are now in attendance. It's our pleasure to invite you to have this conversation about what the fall is going to look like from all the various aspects that we've put so much time and so much effort into planning to ensure both that your students are educated well and that they are safe when they return to campus. I've been asked to talk briefly about the hybrid model. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to check our website about returning for the fall, where we've given extensive details. But in brief, since you've had students who've already attended F&M, you know the traditional semester in which students average 4 courses. In an attempt to ensure that we have safety and health at the forefront of everything that we do, and that we're nimble should we have circumstances befall us that we can't yet plan for, one of the things that we decided to do after vast consultation with faculty, staff, and students was make the decision to divide our semesters into 2 7-week modules. During those 7-week modules, students will have accelerated exposure to course material. And because of that, we will not be asking them to endure the normal 4 courses per term that they would take in a regular semester. So students on average will take 2 courses in each of those modules with 7 weeks of instruction, followed by a week of final exams. We've structured our fall academic calendar slightly differently as well. And in that restructuring, we will allow students to complete our 2nd module of course instruction immediately prior to the traditional Thanksgiving break. Students will then go home for Thanksgiving and they will complete their final exams and final projects remotely. We think that this is the best way to ensure that we can keep our students safe from potentially bringing COVID back to campus should they travel home and then return to campus, and also avoid the traditional high point of the flu season. For those reasons, we thought that that was an opportunity for us to respond as well to student survey results from last spring after we had to move expeditiously into the online space. Students told us that taking more than 2 courses was simply too much in the online environment. And so in restructuring, we've kept that in mind to ensure that students haven't overtaxed themselves. We have also adjusted our calendar in the spring. We will be starting later than we normally would, and that has created a really wonderful opportunity for student engagement with faculty mentors. And that is with the establishment of what we're calling our J term or January term. This is something that F&M traditionally did, and about 30 years ago or so, we restructured and lost the J term. It is a time-honored tradition at many liberal arts colleges because it's a time when a student can devote themselves to diving deeply into a subject matter that's close to their heart and their intellectual curiosity, but in which we may not offer regular coursework. So we are conceptualizing the January term as a completely online experience that will allow students that deep engagement with faculty, even if they're not physically present on campus. I should say that these moves were not done without adequate consultation and deep deliberation. Our Educational Policy Committee reviewed more than 18 different scenarios that we looked at for returning for the fall. And they felt like this was the one that was the most consistent with our undergirding values and those 4 pillars that President Altman so articulately explained. In addition, we worked closely with experts at institutions for whom this is their normal academic calendar. We wanted to ensure that we had planned a year-long program with the modules that would allow us to have our students engage in the fullest range of extracurricular activities possible. And so we've consulted the very best experts on that. I know you have questions about what the classroom experience will be like for your students once we return in the fall. And I am delighted to say that earlier today, I received information that more than 70% of our Module 1 and Module 2 courses will be offered on campus in the fall. That's a very encouraging sign, and I think that it speaks to the deep commitment that our faculty share in wanting to work closely with our students in helping them achieve their academic goals and their academic success. So what that means is that the vast majority of classroom experiences this fall will model the same sort of classroom experiences that your students had prior to COVID. Although we will be respecting all of the personal distancing requirements that are mandated by the CDC and the Pennsylvania Department of Health. I've also been asked before this started, what kind of protocols will be engaged in the students' laboratories and classrooms to ensure their safety. So we are going to maintain a 36 square foot spacing for each student to ensure their physical safety. And we will also be requiring faculty and students to wear masks. That will ensure that they are also protected. And that's also consistent with the best medical guidelines that we have. We will provide ample supplies of sanitizers and other personal protective equipment, again, just so that we can ensure the safety of the students and other members of our community. Parents are also concerned about whether their students closing out on graduation will be able to get all of the courses necessary for them to complete their academic programs. And I can assure you that this was the centerpiece of our planning in addition to student safety, to make sure that we could offer the same robust and challenging academic programs that you've come to know and expect from Franklin and Marshall. We have structured all of our modules, 1 through 4, as well as the J term, with flexibility to meet individual students' educational needs. We've worked closely with our faculty and individual department chairs to make sure that required courses are spread throughout our modules so that students will be able to plan schedules that are both timely and appropriate in completing their degrees. And I can tell you this, although we don't anticipate any impediments to your students completing their courses that they will need to graduate, if problems do arise, we have a response team in our registrar's office and in my office with my associate deans, as well as broad support from our faculty, that we will work collectively to make sure that we can resolve those issues and allow students who are on target to graduate continue to make that progress that they need. I am really excited about the opportunity to welcome your students back to campus. I am closing in on my first anniversary as a member of the Franklin and Marshall family, and I have to say it has been quite a remarkable first year. Those of you with students who are now sophomores, you probably share that thought as well. And what I have to say is in this year at Franklin and Marshall, I've learned a great deal about our faculty, our staff, and our students, about their resilience and their desire to get the most that they possibly can from their educational experiences. And although the vast majority of our courses are going to be offered in a traditional on-campus environment, we will be offering roughly 30% of our courses in an online space. Unless you think that this will be the same online experience that your students had last spring, I'm here to dispel those thoughts. Our faculty have trained, have worked, and have progressed tremendously in ensuring that they have immersed themselves in the best engagement practices and pedagogies for online education. So for those faculty who have elected the online route for their courses, I promise you that they have designed them with synchronous course meetings, with deep engagement, with opportunities for community building, for students to be mentored in many of the same ways that you would normally expect, and in some that will probably shock and surpass your expectations. Our faculty are committed to building a community of scholars, and that commitment to your students is the cornerstone of what you expect from an F&M education. Now, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Vice President Margaret Hazlett, and Margaret is going to talk about many of the plans that Student Affairs has made for the fall.
Thanks, Cam. Hello, families. I hope everybody is healthy and cool. It is hot and steamy in Lancaster this evening, so I know that's quite the same across the country, but just very excited to have some time with you tonight to talk about our planning for the fall. As many of you know, and I hope some of you engaged in the activities that we pivoted to virtually from the middle of March, student life stepped in across the board, from Trivia Tuesdays and meditation and yoga to Ospagod programming, faith and meaning initiatives from the Alice Drum Women's Center, virtual 5K from athletics. So we learned a great deal. We sent out a student survey similar to from the Provost area. We sent one from Student Affairs in June and got some great feedback. Over 900 students responded to our survey about how they engaged, what platforms they used. Did they have enough information, not enough information? How did they handle it emotionally? How did you all handle it emotionally as a family? The financial impact. And so hearing all of that was great information as us in Student Affairs get prepared for those students who are returning in person this fall, as well as who will be continuing on virtually. And so that we can provide programs that are responding to the needs as students are arriving in a very different place than they left in the middle of the March. And we recognize that. President Altman talked about some of those resources, particularly as we think about student wellness and the availability there. And as we talk about testing, putting out best practices and educating the community about our expectations. We want students back, but to do this grand experiment successfully, all of our 18 to 22 plus year olds will really need to adhere to the physical distancing guidelines, mask wearing, hygiene, washing the hands, small group gatherings. It's going to be different. And that's what we continue to promote out to our students, but creative. I keep saying the hallmark of an F&M student is creativity and innovation. And that's what we're counting on come the fall as students return. We already have a lot of students involved in our planning. Student Affairs has 10 working groups going on, and we have students involved in each one of those, along in partnership with our Student Government Diplomatic Congress, as we together create this experience both in the co-curricular as well as in the residential setting. Housing, I know that is topic number one for many of you, and that work, we sent out a survey just last week once we knew what the plan was for the fall to invite students back to campus. The next day, we sent a survey out to students to give us a sense of preferences as we look at singles versus doubles, as we look at our availability for on-campus housing, what some possibilities might be off campus, how attractive that might be to our students. So it was important for us to get that feedback, and responded they did. So thank you very much. So we're using that information now, and we anticipate getting information out next week to all of our students about housing. I do know we have a number of students on the wait list after our housing lottery this spring, as well as then those for students whose study abroad programs got canceled in the fall. I want to rest assure everybody we will find a bed for every student, and that's the work we're doing now, and be able to communicate that out, as I said, next week. Quickly following behind housing is dining. And there's been a working group working closely with Sodexo, our food service provider, some creative options taking place there. And we got practice. We had over 250 students in residence in the spring. Sodexo pivoted very quickly to ensure that we were practicing physical distancing, ensuring that food was given to students, that there were grab and go options. Those have only been strengthened and enhanced as we prepared for the fall. There's going to be a dining a reservation app, so students can reserve a time to come in and be in community in the dining hall. We'll have tables with plexiglass separating students, but that they can still share a meal, because we recognize that's a really important part about being in a residential learning community, is that community around food. We'll also have continued grab and go options over at the College Center and Blue Lime. So those are some of the pieces. Student organizations are already planning and thinking creatively. We had great success on engaging students across the 4 years virtually in different offerings. That plan we will continue, as well as then having smaller groups. We'll get word out about it, the social life after hours. We will have fun, just a little different in size and scope. But that again, just and wellness will be at the heart of all we do, and safety. So we'll turn it back over to Katie, because I know we want to open it up for questions that you all have for us.
Great, thank you, Margaret. I think we're gonna probably go back to you, Provost Wesson. Can you go into a little bit more detail about sort of what the class schedule is gonna look like with the modular format? And I think maybe you could talk a little bit about our blended learning and what it means in terms of our synchronous and asynchronous classes, and maybe talk a little bit about what those terms mean.
Absolutely. So because we're using an accelerated schedule of 7 weeks, we're doubling the amount of course contacts between faculty and students in those courses. And we are trying to do an inverted or flipped classroom in many, many settings. What that means is when out of class, students will have access to materials online, many of the lectures and many other materials that faculty have made available. And then in the classroom setting, faculty are going to pivot and respond to student questions, student concerns, and get a deeper dive on the material rather than just engaging in what we traditionally call the sage on the stage. So for those residential courses here on campus, we're going to prioritize the time that faculty spend with students and use it in a very immersive and creative way. When we talk about synchronicity and asynchronicity, what we're basically talking about is in those online courses. Many online courses at other institutions feature what are essentially asynchronous, or at any time a student wants to take that material, they can access it. There's very limited interaction between students or between students and the faculty member teaching the course. And that is not what an F&M education is about. Our faculty in designing their courses for the fall are required to include those synchronous moments where all of the class meets together and where all of the students learn and exchange information together in concert with the faculty member. So we are very excited about that, and it's something that sets us apart from many other institutions that are attempting to teach online in the fall. It is also something that I believe our faculty are deeply committed to in engaging our students in every way that they possibly can. And so regardless of time zone, regardless of other limitations, our faculty recognize that we need to give students that face-to-face, hands-on education, even if it's virtually hands-on, that you've come to expect from us.
Thank you, Cam. I have one other quick question just to confirm our January term that we're discussing for this year. Am I correct? That's completely online?
That is correct. So the January term is going to be completely online experience. There will not be a residential component from that. So our plan is that students, when they leave campus during the Thanksgiving break and then complete final exams off campus, the next time that they will be residential is when we start module 3 in the spring. So the J term will be an online experience.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to turn over to VP Hazlett now, just to talk a little bit more about, for our students that are coming back to be for our residential experience. Will we, can you talk a little bit more about the move-in process? I think that we're going to want to have possibly a staggered approach and maybe touch a little bit on sort of what is the inner workings and sort of the thoughts behind what our protocol and process will be for that. I don't know if Margaret's still there. Okay, maybe we'll come back to, actually, Donna, I want to welcome
I think
Donna.
I might be able to get us started, and hopefully Margaret will join us in just a minute. But Katie, I think the question was move-in process. So we are, as President Altman mentioned, we will be testing all students as they arrive on campus. And as we think about move-in and that testing, we are starting to really dig down into the details of staggered moving move-in and coordinating with testing. We should be able to announce those move-in dates within the next week or so. We're just finalizing and detailing that, and we look forward to sharing that all as housing details as well as move-in dates and the testing protocols.
Great, thank you, Donna. Our next question is, if we have students that, especially our international students that are coming over for the fall, will there be an option for them to be able to stay during the after Thanksgiving, so during that December and January timeframe? Will there be an option for them to stay on campus? Donna, I don't know if Margaret's back on, if you'll be able to answer that, or
again, I would ask Margaret to jump in, or any of my colleagues to jump in as well. We are really committed to closing campus residential housing from November through the J term. And we will, but if international students are living on a college affiliated housing in the Crow, in the College Row or James Street properties, those properties, and they have signed a lease, of course, they're welcome to stay. But we're really encouraging all students that are living on campus to be able to find a way home.
Great, thank you, Donna. And Donna, while I still have you on here, if you don't mind just talking briefly about our ROOT committee, just to kind of give our parents an understanding of all of the work that has been going into place just for us to make our decision to reopen campus in the fall.
Happy to. And first, let me say, I just had a text from Margaret and her computer is frozen. Worst time for that to happen. So I know she's frantically trying to get back online, and I'm sure she will be soon.
Great, thanks, Donna.
Yeah, sure. Love to talk about the ROOT. So the reopening operations team is a group of colleagues that represent many departments across the campus. They include the faculty, they include facilities, operations, IT, just a widespread community. And what we are charged with is to work with other communities on campus, student affairs committees, committees in facilities, committees with dining services, to pull together all the information, and then there is a lot of it, to open safely and really put our students first, but also our campus community, and make sure that the pillars that Barbara talked about are all fully represented. So we continue to meet daily, and those subcommittees meet daily as well as we work through all the details. And we, I can be honest here and say we would love to deliver information, as quickly as everyone would love to have it, but we are truly being diligent and trying to examine every detail in the best possible manner. Thanks, Katie.
Thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. Provost Wesson, I wanted to throw a few more questions out your way. One of them are, I know that we released information to our students over the past few weeks about with going the modular route with our academic classes, that there will be the need to re-register for classes. Can you just talk to us about deadlines and dates and how that process is going to work?
Sure. So the deadlines and dates for re-registration have been set by the registrar in consult with the Educational Policy Committee. I do not want to misstate those dates because anything that I tell you here in this context will be seen as the gospel. But what I will tell you is those dates are published on the Return to Campus website. And we will continue to update that as new information, particularly on the spring and J term, become available. But we will register by class as we generally have. And one of the real advantages to an opportunity to re-register, and I know that it's a pain, and I know that our students did not want to have to go back through that process, simply by dividing our semester up into these modules, we were forced to do so. But we had 128 students who had previously registered for an off-campus study abroad in the fall. With the collapse of study abroad globally and the State Department travel restrictions, we made the proactive step several weeks ago to cancel all of our F&M sponsored study abroad. And this gives a large group of students who had otherwise been locked out of campus course registration processes an opportunity to participate with their classmates and ensure that they get the courses that they need to graduate. I've worked very closely with our Vice President for Finance and Administration to secure extra funding to ensure that those areas where we need additional courses, we will be able to schedule them as appropriate. So we are prepared to scale up our academic offerings and the possibility to offer those courses that might be bottlenecks for students. But I do recognize that the re-registration process is one that unfortunately, by making this move to modules, we had to make. Katie, did you have more questions for me?
I think I actually have one other one. Can you, you mentioned that 70% of our classes would be available in person and 30% online. Can you go into a little bit more detail on that, just to describe? So for instance, if I'm taking a class home remotely, is that class going to be offered remotely and in person? And how will the students be able to differentiate between those?
So that's great. It turns out that 72% of the courses that we have for modules 1 and 2 are offered on campus, and 28% will be online. That does not mean, however, that a student who needs a course that's being offered on campus who chooses not to be residential will not have access to that course or course material. All of our on-campus courses will maintain an opportunity for students to participate remotely. So we hope that your students are excited and that you're excited about them returning to F&M in the fall. But should you find yourself in a situation where you're not able to send your student back, or they choose not to come back, that does not mean that they will not be afforded the courses that they need. So our on-campus courses are going to be open to students who will participate remotely in the life of those courses. And our faculty have designed their courses with that possibility of inclusion for online students. And I should say the decisions that guided those principles were the same ones that we want to extend to you and to your student. Our faculty, many of them are in the demographic and age categories that are most susceptible to adverse outcomes from COVID-19. We wanted to ensure that they had some agency and could express their thoughts about how they best wanted to engage students in the fall. And so we gave our faculty the opportunity to elect how they were going to teach their courses. And I believe that that was the right decision to make, just as I believe it's the right decision for us to allow our students to continue to pursue their F&M education, whether they choose to be physically on campus with us or to join us remotely.
Thank you, Cam. I really appreciate you going into more detail on that. I think that Margaret is back on. So VP Hazlett, wonder if I can throw a few questions your way. You know, I think so many of our students and parents are excited to get back on campus and have that sense of normalcy of, you know, their extracurricular activities and those things that are involved. Can you speak a little bit about that? And I was wondering too, if you could just talk a little bit about the Centennial Conference recent announcement yesterday, I think, about how fall sports are impacted.
Sure. Thanks, Katie. And sorry about that. Done all these town halls, first time to have a computer snafu, but glad to be back. Well, Ferd, I know we all crave some normalcy, and I'll burst that bubble now. It's not going to be that way this fall, but that isn't to say, you know, you won't be able to engage in those things you love, and being able to be in community with your friends and be a part of the co-curricular experience. And that goes with athletics. The decision did not come as a big surprise to us as we've been looking at and watching just nationally how things are playing out, both at the NCAA level, D1 through D3 athletics, and as this virus just hangs on for us here. Again, everybody's prioritizing health and safety. So the decision at this time, I will say, related to competition in the fall has been suspended, but leaves open the door that let's see where we are in September. And as we all know, things change, and that there may be some possibility that competition could resume for not all our sports, but maybe for some, and that would be really exciting. At the very least, our teams are able to come together following the NCAA reopening guidelines, and to do that in a safe manner. And as I just said to some students the other day, you know, we all know sports is more than just competition. It truly is about coming together and learning from each other, and those friendships that develop, and those will be there this fall. So that's what we're planning for. Beyond varsity athletics, though, we're also expanding our recreational offerings, again, through virtual as well as in person. I'm pleased to report our pool opened on Monday of this week. We're working to get the tennis courts open, being able to offer, again, some recreational opportunities for students to be able to sweat, do some intramural programs. So again, things will just be a little different, but you'll be able to have fun, get out with friends, get involved, and pursue some of your interests.
May I jump in, Katie? And Margaret, may I just add to what you said? I sit on the President's Council for the Centennial Conference, and I wanted just to add to what Dean Hazlett told you that the statement from the conference, if you look at it closely, does say that the presidents will meet again in the middle of September to reassess and to see if circumstances have changed. One of the biggest hesitation for all campuses was allowing travel between schools, because we can be working very hard to keep our own communities safe, but of course what other communities doing are beyond our control. So the one sport that we said categorically cannot happen in the fall but may happen in the spring is football. So there is a possibility of a spring football season. And in the meantime, I'm very pro athletics. I'm always one of the presidents in the conference who is looking very actively for ways for us to continue on with all of our sports programs. I think it's very important that each team will still be an entity unto itself, and our coaches are so ready to have the teams train and work out together and to keep that group of athletes close as a social structure and as a kind of home away from home for them. So we will be meeting again by the middle of September, and we will be making some adjudications sport by sport to see what is possible. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's simply that interinstitutional competition is suspended for now.
Thank you, President Altman. I also wanted to point out, we do have a really extensive frequently asked questions page within our godiplomats.com website that really goes into a lot of details about the decision with the Centennial Conference and whatnot. So it's a great reference for all of our families to take a look at that. And as I understand, it will be updated as there's more to update on that. I'd like to pivot a little bit, and I think now this might be going back to Donna Flum, talking about, we understand we'll be testing all of our students as they're coming back to campus. I'm not sure if our root committee has decided this yet, but could you talk a little bit about, we have a lot of our students that are coming from out of state, will be coming internationally, and the state of Pennsylvania right now has some restrictions in place for quarantining from coming out of state. So Donna, I don't know if you can speak a little bit about that and how we plan to implement that.
I'm actually going to toss that and see if President Altman, who really understands all the protocol of testing, but I'm happy to jump in.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thanks, Donna. And of course, much is shifting around us. So at the moment, if you look on the state of Pennsylvania website, you see a list of about a dozen states which are identified as locations from which people arriving in Pennsylvania are now required to quarantine for 14 days. Not surprisingly, the states identified are the ones with the spikes in COVID-19 cases. So across the South, Texas, Arizona, Florida, but also some of the Midwest states where things have spiked again. We expect that situation will shift considerably in the 6 weeks between now and the beginning of our arrival period. And so we will be keeping a very close eye on what the state regulations are. What we do know for certain is that we have contracted with the University of Pennsylvania and Penn Medicine to do our testing for us. So they are testing all of the University of Pennsylvania students as they begin school, and they are going to apply the same protocol and the same procedures for us. It means that as we do a staggered start with probably something like 200 to 300 students arriving at a time. Those students will be tested as soon as they get here, and then they will have to wait in self-quarantine until they get their test results. With Penn Medicine, that is quite a quick turnaround time. With some other commercial providers, it's considerably longer. So we deliberately chose a provider who was both very reputable, had the best scientific knowledge, and also can give us a quick turnaround time so that people don't have to wait too long. We will then test again a week later to catch all of the second round positives that might have manifested by then. After that, we will do surveillance testing of a random sampling of the population to make sure that we always know what degree of COVID is showing up amongst us. And we have various algorithms and various pivot points that will tell us whether we are sliding into community spread or whether we are still at a manageable level. We also have a facility reserve that will be our quarantine and isolation space. And you can be sure that your students would not be all alone and jettisoned in Siberia there. They will in fact have employees with them, medically competent employees with them in case they need medical attention. We will make sure that they get food service. They will each have a private room with a private bath, and we will take very good care of them. They can continue to take advantage of all of our services and all of our supplementary programs remotely from that facility. If they get ill, of course, we have the great good fortune of being just a mile away from our excellent local hospital, Lancaster General Health, which is in fact affiliated also with Penn Medicine. And as you probably know, our wellness center is run by a Lancaster General Health employee, Dr. Amy Myers. She is our consulting medical physician and the director of our wellness center. So we feel well provided, and we're very fortunate to have this structural connection to a first-rate medical facility that can do reliable testing for us. I hope that that answers some of your questions. Many of the others will depend on where Pennsylvania is and what the state of infection is in other states around the country by the time we start bringing students back.
Thank you, President Altman. One of the other questions that's coming up, and I don't know if this will be for you or maybe Donna can answer, is how will we keep our students informed and our parents informed about sort of where we stand with cases with COVID? Are there certain, like you said, pivot points where if cases were at a certain number, how does that affect, would classes go online? So I guess parents are just really looking to see how that information will be relayed to them. Oh, you're on mute, sorry.
Sorry about that, forgive me. Dean Hazlett, you gave a great answer to this earlier today when we spoke with our students. Would you like to give that same answer to the parents?
Sure. I will say COVID's here in Lancaster, and we assume COVID's here on our campus. We are an open campus. We have students who are living near the campus in apartments and working off campus and traveling. So I think for everybody coming into this community, we are similar to every city in the country. And that's why it is imperative that everybody practice what the city of Lancaster has been doing, knock on wood, very successfully, of keeping those numbers down with mask wearing, with the physical distancing, with washing hands and good hygiene and staying away from large gatherings. So that's critical. We know as students return, the virus will be here. But we also have to be sensitive that individual students, as well as faculty and professional staff, their health is that personal information. So our Student Wellness Center will be monitoring it. We will keep the senior staff informed, obviously with guidance from Lancaster Penn Medicine, as well as the state of Pennsylvania. But again, the big push is for us to recognize the virus is part of our community as it is where you are today, and we will continue to work collectively to keep those numbers down and mitigate it to the best of our ability.
Margaret, thank you. And I'll add to that we are fully trained already in contact tracing, so that we have a very well articulated system worked out where our Human Resources Center and personnel and our Wellness Center medical staff will do whatever contact tracing is necessary. If that set of contacts involves Lancaster residents who are not employees or students of the college, then we will have the help of Lancaster General Health also with the contact tracing. We have had one instance recently of an employee who tested positive, and we were able to test that contact tracing protocol, which proved to be very effective. Luckily, no one else tested positive, just for your information, but we have a very good system of working this out, and we will be able to apply that to any students and to any employees who do in fact test positive, and we will put them in the appropriate quarantine and isolation quarters that we're keeping for them, and we will take very good care of them. And as Dean Hazlett said, we will of course protect the personal information of anyone who does fall ill, but we are ready to deal with that if it happens, and it likely will, because we are not immune from the rest of the world.
Thank you, President Altman. Dean Hazlett, I'm going to bring you back up here. We'll pivot a little bit more. Just talking about social life, a lot of questions about Greek life, Greek housing, registered parties on campus. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know a lot of answers we don't have yet, but maybe kind of the process we're thinking about.
Yeah, the process is engaging your students to say, okay, folks, right, this is what we've got to deal with. How are we going to do this for it to be, again, thinking of health and safety of our community? So we are starting that work this summer with our student leaders and different from fraternities and sororities, from our student athletes, Diplomatic Congress, to help us really rethink the social life. As long as the weather's nice, gosh, gathering outside is my preference. And again, doing it so that masks are worn, physical distancing, and holding each other accountable, because that's how it's going to work. Then when we move indoors to the cooler weather, it is going to have to be different. We just can't have some of the larger gatherings we've had in the past. And so talking to students and to get their heads around just small gatherings, people and practicing what's safe for the whole community. So how it's going to happen successfully is coming from the students and the student leadership leaning into this. I have full confidence that we'll figure this out, and they'll do a really good job of holding each other accountable on this.
Oh, thank you, Dean Hazlett. Go ahead, Barbara.
May I jump in just quickly? One of the things that's really interesting and unique to F&M about the social compact that we are preparing, that all employees and all students will be asked to sign on to, is that we are the only school in the country that we know of where we've had really strong participation from students in developing that language. So this is something in which we have really big buy-in from our students, and it doesn't surprise me that that would happen here. So that speaks to what Dean Hazlett was talking about. And we will also have health ambassadors from among the students working with their peers to make sure that all of this goes well and that everyone reminds themselves of what we need to do daily. Also, we cannot get complacent. And so there's going to be a lot of education before students arrive, and that education will continue all the way through. It's easy after a while to say, oh, I don't need my mask right now, I'm just running to the mailbox. Well, in fact, we do. So we're going to be making sure that it's visible with signage and visible through peer-to-peer and all kinds of other forms of information all throughout the term when people are with us here on campus.
Thank you, President Altman. Another question that seems to be a recurring question coming through is talking about the mental health of our students. There's so many changes that are going on right now. So Dean Hazlett, I don't know if you can talk a little bit. We have such an integral DIP Cares program, but maybe some of the other initiatives that we're working with to support our students during this time.
Yeah, thank you, Katie. That is first and foremost. The virus we're all learning to live with, but and we're learning daily on just the different form. But the mental health piece, I'm probably more concerned about, and I'm glad parents are thinking the same thing. Just shortly, I don't know if all of you were aware how we pivoted, thinking of that intentionally when we moved to online and students had to head back or head to different locations around the globe. We set up immediately this virtual care program where we found staff volunteers who reached out to every single one of our students to check in with them by text or email just to see how they were doing. And that proved very beneficial, just as well as making sure if students knew someone was caring about them and thinking about them. If they had issues, whether it was on the academic front, financial, accessing medical care, there was someone who could find those answers for them and circle back. We plan to do that again this fall to, again, just make sure that every student has a touch point, whether they're on campus or not. The wellness program will be ramped up. as I said, we have a very well-established mindfulness program that we'll be doing as far as helping students. We're doing a training for student life in August, right before students arrive, for staff, and that involves coaches as well as employees in student affairs related to mental health first aid. As we know, our students are navigating not only the COVID, Black Lives Matters, many involved in the protests and engagement on racial justice issues, as well as the election coming up, changes to the Title IX process, just a lot that is hitting this age group. And we want to be sensitive and recognize that. So it's really important that our staff is trained up to recognize signs and then help intervene as needed, and to get those resources out to students so that they know what those are. So we are thinking about those things. The HA program, the college health system that we have during, we'll do some intensive work with our HAs. Those are the upper class students who are in residence with our first years and sophomores. And we're really working on building much stronger intentional communities within those living spaces. Even if we have more students in singles and doubles than we have historically, those connections will even be more important at this time. So that's some of the work we're doing and we're thinking about this fall.
Thank you, Dean Hazlett. I do actually have two more questions, President Ottman, and then I think I can turn it over to you. But one is actually kind of exciting. We have the new Winter Visual Arts Center that a lot of our families have seen rise up from the ground. So I really kind of want to talk about a positive spin. And can you talk a little bit about the process? Will that be opening in the fall, and will our students be able to access it?
I'm delighted to talk to you about the Winter Visual Arts Center. As it happens, I toured it yesterday with Provost Wesson and one of our colleagues, and it is the first time I'd been in the building since February. And the transformation is remarkable. It is a building of great beauty and with spaces unlike any academic spaces you've seen. We were really excited to see it, and it's so close to finish. We do expect that we will be able to hold classes and other activities in that building this fall. The donor, Mr. and Mrs. Winter, have actually asked that we hold off on the official opening perhaps until the following fall, because they are worried about bringing their family for the celebration from all across the country. But that doesn't mean we can't have small inauguration events there. We looked at classrooms, at the cinema, at seminar rooms, at the atrium, at the pool. It is a remarkable building, and we should be able to use it this fall.
That's great. Thank you, President Ottman. I have one quick question for Cam, and then I'll turn it back over to you. Provost Wesson, just for clarification, we talked about the January term. Is there an additional tuition fee for the January term?
Oh, that's great. I'm so glad that you asked that, because I don't want there to be any confusion. So we've determined that a student who's registered for one of the full terms, either modules 1 and 2 or 3 and 4, is eligible to undertake a J-term course or research experience without additional tuition and fees. It's the right thing to do for our students in our community in a time when so many people are hurting. It's an opportunity for us to reinforce the things that we so value about an F&M education, that close-knit relationship between faculty and students, and that really unbelievable opportunity that the liberal arts education at Franklin and Marshall prioritizes, is to follow your academic interests and follow your passions. So we did not think that it was the right decision to charge for that experience, and so will not incur additional expense.
Thank you, Provost Wesson. President Ottman, as I turn our mic back over to you to close out our program today, I know we have a lot of unanswered questions that we still need to have questions to. So I do want to put a plug in there for any of our parents that jumped on maybe late onto our session. We will be sending out the recording of this next week during our monthly parent newsletter. So definitely look at your email for that, or if anyone wants to reach out to me, we can certainly make sure that happens. President Ottman, as we're closing, can you just give some advice to our parents and our students on how to make this decision as they're coming back to campus? And we really just value your insight, and if you could touch on that.
I'd be happy to do that, Katie, and I thank you for doing such a great job of what must have been consolidating a whole lot of questions. I'd also like to thank Libby, our ASL interpreter, who helped us out today. Also, thanks to Donna Flum and Margaret Hazlett and Cam Wesson for answering so many questions. I'm the mother of two young men, and I can understand. I really empathize with how difficult this decision is. I think you and your children need to talk to each other frankly and openly about how much your child is interested in participating in what is going to be a grand experiment and a very important one for this country and for higher ed. There's no better place than colleges like ours, than Franklin and Marshall and other residential liberal arts colleges with really motivated, high achieving students, than to try to figure out a different way to live with COVID-19 among us during this pandemic. Sooner or later, there will be a vaccine that is widely available. Sooner or later, there will be better drugs for treating people who are badly afflicted with this particular virus. But in the meantime, we need to learn to live differently. And where better to do that than with a lot of very smart people who are highly motivated because they know the power of doing these things in community together. So I think my advice to you would be to have a heart to heart and to let that thought evolve over a few days, and really to have a realistic understanding of what your child will be agreeing to if he or she or they come to join us. Please know that we are enormously enthusiastic about this. Of course, I feel trepidation. I would not be paying attention to what's going on in the world if I weren't feeling some anxiety and some worry about this fall myself. And it's a huge decision for us to make. But given that we can offer the option of having students work online from a location other than campus or to come and do this with us, we feel that everybody, faculty, many of our staff, although not all, and students as well, have a choice of how you want to do this next year. We hope that you'll choose to do it here on campus with us. It's an important moment in the history of education. It's an important moment in the history of the country as we learn to grapple with many fundamental shifts that are going on at the moment, and the fact that we have not done well in the national approach to this particular pandemic. So it will depend on all of us committing to what needs to be done. But I would say to my children, who are both pretty intrepid, although both physically cautious, I think that they would probably choose to do this. And I think if I were the parent of college-age children now, I would encourage them to make up their own minds after discussing it fully with me. But if they chose to come, I would support it. That's why I am doing this now here and why we have made the decision to reopen, knowing that if circumstances beyond our control necessitate that we pivot and go again to an empty campus with online instruction, we are fully prepared to do so. So the name of the game, in order to do this successfully, we need to be nimble. We've set up an academic delivery program that accommodates that. We've had experience with it now in the spring, and we have great consultants and a very strong team leading this initiative. So I feel that we are ready to do it as well as it can possibly be done. And I have great faith in our students. You will hear me say over and over again, I have been in the academy for 30 years. I was full-time faculty for 23. I was at a high-intensity research university for 25 years. I was at a peer school. And in all of my experience, F&M students are the best students I've ever seen. That goes along with a maturity of analysis and a maturity in poise that allows them to make good decisions, even though they are in a demographic where they are not as risk averse as some of us who are a little older. But I think it's very possible. And we want to try this because we think that we can do it as well as it can be done. So please feel free to write if you care to. I can't promise a long answer, but if you have questions that turn on information and logistics, those you should send to the website. And if you are agonizing, take the time to think it through. You still have some time to make that decision. Please know that we are so warmly welcoming of the students who come back, and we were so excited that 90% of them said they wanted to be here. Let us know if you're struggling with that decision. I'd be delighted to talk to you about it briefly on the phone or by email. Thanks for being with us today.